Today, Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine takes on wild blueberries. But once you start taking care of them, are they still wild?
When you tame something, and actually the USDA calls cultivated blueberries tame blueberries. So that's the official government.
Tame blueberries.
Tame blueberries is the official government. But, if you give it a name and you bring it home, it's no longer wild.
This is Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. For 1 hour on Saturday morning, we stop talking about football and baseball and start looking around us to the incredible outdoors that is the birthright of all Mainers. There are so many things that we all take for granted, but when you look into them a little bit, it turns out there's a lot you don't know. Today, we're going to tame the wild blueberry. Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine is brought to you by Hammond Lumber, O'Neill's Power Equipment, Old Town Trading Post, Dysarts, EBS, and Napa Auto Parts. It's blueberry season. We're doing something that humans have been doing in the state since the last ice age. But with a little science, we're doing more of it. 60,000 acres of Maine is blue right now. We've taken something that grows wild and added $250 million to our economy. Nobody knows more about that than Dr. David Yarborough, University of Maine Cooperative Extension Service blueberry specialist. And I'm in his office right now. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks. Glad to have you here.
All right, first question, why are Maine blueberries the best?
Maine blueberries are the best because they're wild, and that's the way nature made them. Essentially, they're a lot different than cultivated blueberries, principally the size. Size difference, a lot more concentrated flavor. Their skin, blue skin, has these anthocyanins, which are antioxidants, which are healthy. They're about twice as much as cultivated blueberries. Our fields are very different in that we have a lot of genetic diversity. Wild blueberries, and at any given field there might be hundreds of thousands of different varieties. All of these particular varieties have different flavors, flavor profiles, and so when you gather them, you get a complex mixture. Versus cultivated blueberries, when you go in, you get one or two varieties and one or two flavors. That's principally why wild blueberries.
So if I get a blueberry from New Jersey, that's why it's boring?
Well, it's boring for a number of reasons. One is it has one or two varietal flavors.
Yeah.
The other is they try to pick it a little bit early in order for it to keep, so it's a little bit underripe, and they don't really ripen as well. The other is that, there's several days in transport. With wild blueberries, generally we go out and we pick them, and they're frozen within 24 hours, so that locks in that flavor that you get in the freezer.
Yeah, you look at these big plump blueberries in your salad at some restaurant or something, and you think you're going to get a good flavorful bite there, and it's really not all that exciting.
Yes, unfortunately, with blueberries, the color comes up before the flavor does. So if you pick them a little bit underripe, they look nice, but they don't taste nice. Also, there's a lot more water in a cultivated blueberry in the flesh.
Now, you said there were a bunch of varieties out there in any given field. Are you talking different species or just variations of one species, or what do we got out there?
Principally variations of one species. Basically, we call them clones. Each one of those plants started from a seedling. So you may have a small plant a few feet wide, and on the blueberry barrens where they've been managing blueberries for the past few hundred years, you can have one plant, a clone, the size of a football field. So they can be very big blueberry plants. Very small berries, but very big plants.
Boy, I didn't see that one coming.
No.
So is this one of those rhizome things where you've basically got one plant and then spreads its roots way underground and all over the place?
That's correct. Vegetative growth. And blueberries put a lot of fruit on it, but principally they spread underneath the ground, actually 2/3 of the plants underneath the ground. So when we prune the plants back, we're just taking off about 1/3 of the biomass, and that regenerates.
So that's why they come right back after you mow them or burn them.
That's correct.
And the weeds don't.
Well, the weeds do too. But,
damn those weeds!
Yeah, it's a fact of life. You can't get by without weeds, but we have ways to control the weeds.
How many blueberry species are there in, let's say, Maine to start with?
Well, in Maine, there are three principal blueberry species. There is the wild high bush, which is like the New Jersey blueberries, and then we have two different species of low bush, Vaccinium angustifolium and Vaccinium myrtleoides. The myrtleoides is sour top. It's a little taller. The fruit's a little bit more tart. The plant's a little bit taller, so it's a little bit different. But looking at them, you really can't tell a difference actually between all three, because our wild high bush are very small. And then there's a couple of other minor species that occur up on Katahdin or along the rivers that aren't commercially viable.
Okay, I was wondering because all the blueberries do look alike, but some are just taller than others. Some are blackish.
Yes, there are different varieties. There's a variety called nigrum, and basically all blueberries are blackish, but what you have is this waxy coating on the blueberry fruit. And so if you take a real light blueberry, you rub it, it's going to be blackish underneath. So those blacker varieties tend to be actually a little sweeter, and they don't have that waxy bloom coating.
Well, in fact, if you put blueberries on your cereal, they sort of turn blackish because the powder comes off.
That's correct. Yep. Or if you wash them, they you wash off that waxy coating, so they are darker underneath. But the darker is good. That's that dark blue pigment that's healthy for you.
Okay, why is Maine so good at growing blueberries?
Well, I think it has to do with history and tradition, but basically we have the right environment for the low bush or the wild blueberry. Glacier was here about 10,000 years ago. It kind of ground up the rocks and left us with a lot of sand without much nutrition. Now, the low bush or the wild blueberry has a relationship with fungi, a symbiotic relationship. The fungi itself, the mycorrhizal association, pulls nutrients out of the soil, and the blueberry gives it some food, so it trades. So this enabled the blueberry to be one of the very first plants coming in that low nutrient environment. So the blueberry's been here a good 10,000 years along that,
So it's one of those colonizing plants that used to come back after a fire.
Correct. And it's still, generally, it still is in the understory of the woods, and that's how we create our wild blueberry fields, not by planting blueberries as the cultivated do, but we clear the forest and we open up the light and we control the weeds, and the blueberries then themselves take off and fill in.
I'm not the brightest bulb in the chandelier, but I put two and two together. I've been on the Maine Ice Age Trail.
Yes.
And so I've seen over in the Columbia Blueberry Barrens, for instance, all the glacial artifacts that are still there and obvious. And I was able to put two and two together and say, oh, it's the well-drained sandy soil that makes great blueberry habitat, and that's what the glacier did.
That's correct. That's right. And also the environment. We have an acidic soil with the trees and the organic matter. Our organic matter in blueberries is up around 10 or 15%. In a garden, it might be 2 or 3%. So, and the pH is very different. The pH is around 4, which is very acid. Most plants would not like that.
In fact, a lot of reclaimed or new blueberry fields seems to be when they're cutting the coniferous vegetation back on the edges, which I assume is a sign of the acidity that's in the soil there.
Yes. A lot of the conifers, they grow in and shade out the blueberries, but the blueberries are really great survivors. They're not very good competitors, but they'll survive in the understory. You take the pines out and they'll snap right back and grow.
We're taming the wild blueberry today. Dr. David Yarborough is my guest. He's the blueberry guy at the University of Maine Cooperative Extension Service. Coming up next, exactly who are we competing against? It can't be one of those places that grow those big, flavorless berries. I'll ask the question in a moment when Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine continues on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. It's wild blueberries on Wild Maine today. You know them, you love them. But how much do you really know about the taming of the blueberry? I'm in the office of Dr. David Yarborough, the University of Maine blueberry expert. Now, I know we grow a lot of them, but who is our chief competitor? Is it Canada?
Well, it depends on, I guess for the wild blueberry, the Canadians are really the only other place that grow wild blueberries. Maine is the number one grower of wild blueberries in the world. We produce about 90 million pounds. Canada itself, Quebec and the provinces produce maybe 160 million pounds. So they produce more altogether, but individually we produce more than any of them.
Yeah, so Maine is actually very significant in the world economy when it comes to blueberries.
It is, but there are cultivated blueberries, and the cultivated blueberries, unlike the wild blueberries, are grown worldwide. You can get blueberries coming up from Chile in the wintertime. China's growing them now. Europe has been growing them for years, and ever since they domesticated the high bush blueberry. You can take a high bush blueberry, take a cutting from it, and root it in sand, and it grow into a bush in 3 to 5 years. Unlike the wild blueberry, doesn't like to propagate very well. It's not very easy to propagate. So that's really an advantage for us because everybody can't just go out and plant our wild blueberries and get the same thing. We have a really unique resource, and even if they did plant 1 or 2 varieties, it wouldn't be the same as a wild field that has hundreds and thousands of varieties. Mm-hmm. So we have very unique resource here in Maine with that.
When I'm driving around the blueberry barrens, especially down east, which I do a lot, I'm cheering on the crop. What kind of weather am I cheering for?
Well, it depends on the time of the year. Mm-hmm. Basically, in the wintertime, you want snow. You want a nice thick snow cover, so that's good insulation. That keeps the plants from desiccating.
Will kill off.
They won't desiccate. Mm-hmm. In the springtime, what you'd like is generally we have a lot of rain, but we prefer not to have too much rain during pollination. Usually the end of May and into the first part of June, you'd like it to be a bit drier and not so windy. Bees don't like to fly when it's wet, and they don't like to fly when it's windy, especially honeybees.
Yeah.
The bumblebees are much better. They're troopers. They're out there all the time, but we don't have very many of them. Then during the summer, what you'd like is about 1 inch of rain per week and some nice sunshine. Mm-hmm. So if you don't get all those components, you won't get a good blueberry crop.
Yeah. Do we have enough bees now, or is this becoming a challenge?
Well, it is a challenge in the sense that there are some pressures on bees with the colony to collapse disorder. But fortunately for us, the hives tend to collapse in the fall. They bring them down to Florida. They regenerate them. So the bees that we got coming up from Florida are very strong hives. And there isn't really an issue with supply. It's more of a cost issue because with those hives crashing, then they have to repopulate them, and it's more expensive. And the major cost really has been diesel fuel, bringing those hives up across the country. That's been driving the higher prices. So no, there's plenty of beehives. In fact, we brought in probably close to 80,000 hives. Maine is the second largest user of hives in the U.S. after almonds.
No kidding.
Yep.
Wow. Who's third?
Don't know. Haven't gone that far.
Could they ever bring them up on trains, I wonder?
Well, I think it'd be too slow.
Yeah.
Basically, you put a net over them, and you probably want to get them up there as soon as you can. And the bees themselves are basically migrant workers. They're coming in, and they are quite confused. They're in citrus one day, and they come out and they look around for the trees. They're gone, but they adapt and they start foraging close to the hives, and then they work their way out. And as new bees come on, they're integrated into wild blueberries. So it's a tough blossom to pollinate, though, because unlike an open apple blossom, which is really accessible, it's hanging down, and they've got to get in there, and it's really tough to get up in there to get the nectar out of it. So honeybees are really not real efficient. The bumblebees, though, they what they call buzz sonication, come up to a flower and they buzz it, and all the pollen comes right down on them, and so they're very, very efficient pollinators.
Now, that's something I didn't know, too.
Yep.
People ask me a lot, if we're cultivating them in terms of, let's say, fertilization, pest management, can you really call them wild?
Well, I get that question quite a bit, and I say yes. And the reason is it's not really cultivation, it's management. When you tame something, and actually the USDA calls cultivated blueberries tame blueberries. So that's the official government. Tame blueberries is the official government. But, if you give it a name and you bring it home, it's no longer wild.
Yeah.
But if you have to go out and it's there by itself, it's established itself, we are managing it much more intensively. They used to kind of just slash and burn, go in, burn, and come back. But you really can't afford to do that nowadays because of the competition. You've got to be competitive. You've got to be efficient in your growth. So we really do need to have these inputs to be able to produce blueberries. And also, it's an advantage for people because they're more affordable. If we were just producing 20 million pounds like we did 20 years ago, they'd be very expensive blueberries.
Now, when we're driving by throughout the year, we're seeing pollination, spraying, irrigating, harvesting, and then eventually burning or mowing. So there's a cycle to this. What exactly is it we're seeing, and why?
Well, we're nurturing the plants, and there is a particular cycle that we need to go through. And actually, the wild blueberries have a 2-year production cycle. It's very, very different than the cultivated, and that we prune the fields and you get vegetative growth 1 year. And that particular year allows us to reduce any kind of pest inputs. It kind of disrupts insect and disease cycles. And so what we're doing is we're taking a natural plant that would grow and after a while grow into forest, and we're keeping those fields at an early stage of succession. We're kind of keeping it at that initial highly productive stage by doing the pruning. And so by going through and determining what the plants need for nutrients, adding the additional pollinators, even now we're gone into machine harvesting to be more efficient. We're able to take a natural resource, manage it, improve its productivity, and everybody benefits from that.
Do we have enough pickers at this point?
Well, the pickers are not as much of an issue as they used to be. I would say, 15 years ago, 80% of the wild blueberry crop was hand-picked. Now 80% of the wild crop is machine-picked.
Yeah, tell me about that, because I didn't really know how advanced we were getting with machines.
Well, part of it has to do with the terrain, and the fields are very rocky and uneven. But what they've done is gone in with excavators. They pulled out the big rocks. You see these big piles of rocks on the side.
Yeah, I'm seeing that all the time now.
All the time, and that's been done because then you can mechanically mow it. Because burning with oil is very expensive. It might cost you $500 an acre versus $50 or $100 to mow it. So, and then also it's level enough to use the machines. Machines have a rotating head. Actually, the original blueberry picker that's used now was developed at the University of Maine in the 1970s by Gleason Gray. He was in engineering, and he was also Cooperative Extension county agent for Penobscot counties. But that particular head now there's hundreds of those out there, and that allows for a more efficient harvest. The original head had a couple people on the back of the tractor. Now they've got these large boxes that are in kind of a little elevator that drop down in the field, that drop in there. They're able to fill it up. So you have one person in a tractor with the air conditioning on and the country music going and driving. And not only that, they got big lights on the tractors. So they harvest 24 hours now with these large tractors. So it's a very different environment than it was years ago when you had to manage hundreds of people. There have been issues, certainly since 9/11, of bringing people over the border and more stringent requirements. The Micmac Indians typically had come down from Canada to harvest on Township 19, which the Passamaquoddy Indians own the blueberry operation there. But even they're gone to mechanical harvesting. And basically it's two issues: one, having enough labor, and two, being more efficient and cost effective to use a machine.
Today's subject is wild blueberries on Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. My guest is Dr. David Yarborough, the blueberry expert over at the University of Maine Cooperative Extension Service. I'm in his office, and I'm wondering if there's any way to force commercial blueberries to ripen all at once so they can just make one pass at harvesting time and get most of them. If you're wondering the same thing, stay right here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. We're chasing the wild blueberry today. The grand poobah of blueberrydom at the University of Maine is Dr. David Yarborough. And one thing is puzzling me. When I see blueberries out there in the woods, they can be ripening anytime between mid-July and mid-September. On a commercial field, is there any way to make them all ripen at once so you can harvest more of them in one pass?
Unfortunately, that's one of the major disadvantages of being a wild blueberry.
Yeah.
In a cultivated blueberry, what you have is you plant your early, mid-season, and late varieties in one field, and you start with your early varieties, and you pick those, and you progress to the next one. Now, if you're a small grower and you're doing fresh pack, you can go out and select those clones. Take the ripest ones, pick those first. But with the commercial fields, with the machine harvest, there's really nothing that you can do to make everything catch up. Because if one is a very early plant and one is a very late plant, it's really the genetics of the plant that's dictating when they flower, when they fruit, how long it takes for them to ripen. So unfortunately, what we have to do with our wild fields is look at them, figure out when it's the peak of ripeness, when most of them are in ripe, and pick it then. And then they have machines at the processing plants to wash out any green berries or over soft berries. So they're able to clean out. So they tend to have a little bit more waste than you would a cultivated blueberry. But then that waste isn't thrown away. It goes into purees or other particular wine berries, other particular uses. But that would be nice if we could magically get that whole field to ripen all at once. But part of it, that's the price you pay for having those great flavors and that diverse genetics out there. Is that's the major price you pay.
What pests do you have to manage out there?
Well, there are lots of different pests depending on the time of the year. Everything likes blueberries. Some insects, such as spanworm and flea beetle, chew on the leaves. One of the major blueberry pests throughout the world is called the blueberry fruit fly, and it lays an egg in the fruit, and it creates a maggot. And this has been with us in apples have it. Apple maggots, cousin to that. We have a good way to manage for it. We can put out yellow sticky traps, capture them, and we have threshold levels built in so that we know that if there's a certain number of flies, we need to spray to control them. Otherwise, we don't. Now, just recently, we've had a new pest come in from Asia. Came in 2008. Yeah, it's China, Japan. It came in through California, and like within a year, it spread throughout the country. We've got a great system of bringing fruit across country.
Yeah.
So we brought this is called a spotted winged Drosophila. It's easy to say SWD, and everybody after a while everybody knows what you mean. But this is a small, they call it a vinegar fly. It's like if you leave your bananas out too long, and those are the indoor type. These are the rugged ones. These are the outdoor types. These will overwinter in the winter. And not only that, they have a diverse host range. It's not just blueberries. They'll do raspberries. They'll do any other soft fruits out there, blackberries. And so they're coming in from the outside of the field after they're done with the raspberries into the blueberry field. So this has been a much more of a challenge. It takes a different kind of trap. We put there's a solution of yeast and sugar. We're able to capture them, and right now we're still developing trying to develop threshold methods. But unfortunately, what we try to do is harvest as early as we can to try to beat those flies, because their populations tend to build up later in the season. And in September, there's a lot more of them than in August. So fortunately, unless they adapt to Maine conditions and start coming in earlier and earlier, that's probably the two main pests of those fruit flies.
Now, when I drive by blueberry fields, I will often see turkeys out there.
Yes.
Are turkeys eating the berries, or are they eating bugs associated with the berries?
Well, both.
Both. Okay.
And I can say this because I had a graduate student that worked on this, because all the growers were complaining, well, turkeys are eating my blueberries. And so I had a student, she spent 2 summers, just watching them and videoing them and counting the number of pecks they did. And she looked up, if you were a turkey, how many blueberries could you eat? How many calories is that? And, she did the whole dynamics. And we found that, they take a few berries, but they were also in the non-bearing field where there's no fruit.
Yeah. And
they're eating insects, they're eating weeds. And whenever I get complaints from growers saying, well, they're eating my berries, I say, well, you're just paying for the pest control they provided you from the insects. So it's, it's a trade-off. And it is a few pounds, but when we tried to measure the difference by enclosing areas and having areas where the turkeys ate and where they didn't, we couldn't detect the difference.
Oh, okay.
It was so small that we couldn't even measure it.
I have got to think that a turkey that's eating a summer full of blueberries tastes pretty good in the fall.
Yes, I would think, and they're probably healthier for you too. I would think. Yeah.
What other critters are out there actually eating the berries?
Well, there's quite a few, and we had night cameras out, and we see fox out there. We see along the coast, the seagulls are really bad.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. They're major, and in fact, they put out scare guns and occasionally other flocks of birds coming through, especially later in September. They're migrating through. Any berries that are left that the spotted wing didn't get, the birds will probably get. So, and probably I would imagine bears will eat some berries as well. There's blueberries for sale, so that's been documented that they're out eating blueberries. So those would be the major wildlife that would eat blueberries.
Okay. Now, there's an experimental farm up there in Jonesboro, is it?
That's correct.
Yep. What's going on in there?
Well, that's our major farm operation, and on that farm we have facilities to bring people in for meetings. We also do demonstration plots there, and we do treatments that we want to try it out first to make sure it doesn't hurt the farmer's land. We don't want to kill it. If we can kill the blueberries on our farm, that's one thing, but we don't want to kill the blueberries on their farm.
Right.
So what we can do is we have any materials that aren't registered or are new and not sure quite what the effect will be. That experimental farm is for that purpose. So it's there to provide growers answers to their questions, and it's there for demonstration purposes. And so it's a research farm, and also they harvest the berries from the farm to help support the farm itself. And
for years, I've been leading birding tours, especially in the down east Maine. And so when we drive by that hill in Jonesboro, people ask, what are they experimenting on? And I tell them, I'm sure they're testing watering schemes, pesticide management, different cultivars. How close was I?
Well, except for the different cultivars, because again, with blueberries, wild blueberries, they're already out there, so we're not trying to make different cultivars, but also insects and diseases. Certainly, testing traps, testing new methods. Frank Drummond, our entomologist, was using even window screens, excluding to try. The flies kind of go along the ground and they'll bounce off. But it's just we try anything we can. If it works, we tell the growers. If it doesn't, or if it's too expensive, then we can't.
Yeah, this was just a case of me making up an answer to a question without any real knowledge. So I'm glad to confirm a little bit.
Good guess. Good guess.
What attempts have been made with additional mechanical harvesting that didn't really work?
Well, it's funny because my wife saw something in the paper about this machine that 20 years ago they called the Monster, and it was like, I think 20 feet wide, and had all these raking heads, and it went into the field 5 feet and bogged down. That was it. Dug itself into the field. So bigger is not always better, as we know. There's various ideas on picking heads. Right now, the picking head that we have was designed to pick maybe 2,000 or 3,000 pounds an acre. And we're getting up to 10,000, 12,000 pounds an acre on a highly managed field. So, the mechanics of the machine really are not suitable. So they're trying to redesign that picking head. And really the rake, and I think the blueberry rake came first. I was down the cranberries, and they said when they said their rake came in, it was a lot later than our blueberry rake, the Tabit rake in the 1800s, which was kind of looked like a dustpan with a handle on backwards, and with a spring teeth, spring steel teeth. You rake in and you pull the berries back, and it falls back into it. That is still the best method. There are machines that have rakes on the front that just pull it back, and it tends to give you a lot better returns. Get more berries that way. So they are looking at trying to build a better harvester right now.
Is it sort of mimicking what you would do with hand? It's sort of the rake goes in there, shakes around till the berries fall off, or is it just?
Well, it's a combing.
Yeah.
You comb the berries off the bush, and you either comb the berries off the bush in a circular motion, or in a flat motion, and then dump the berries back. What you want to try to do, and especially for fresh market, is handle the fruit gently. You don't want to drop it. You don't want to bruise it. You don't want to cut it. So any way you can gently harvest that fruit. Cultivated machines have these little bars that knock the fruit off, and they fall down, and then they get back with a conveyor. But we have to comb our fruit off. We can't just knock it off. They've tried combines where you go and cut, and they try to. It doesn't work.
My guest is Dr. David Yarborough at the University of Maine Cooperative Extension Service. In a moment, I'll be asking about products made from blueberries, and I expect some of the answers to surprise me. Meanwhile, you should know that the Machias Wild Blueberry Festival is going on right now. It's organized around the Center Street Congregational Church. You can see the steeple from anywhere in town, or just follow the crowds. This is the second day. Live music with Winona's band should have just started playing. The pie eating contest happens at 11. There's a blueberry farm tour. You can catch the free shuttle from Hannaford to Machias. There's a baked bean supper starting at 4:30, a black fly ball at 6, and fireworks in the Causeway tonight at 9 o'clock. Tomorrow starts with a pancake breakfast, and there'll be more music, food, farm tours, and fun till 3 o'clock. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine, and the station is Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. We're taming the wild blueberry this morning. Dr. David Yarborough is the blueberry expert at Cooperative Extension. We're in his office at the University of Maine, and I'm wondering if there are any blueberry products that would take me by surprise.
I'm sure there are. There's blueberry gums. I don't know if you have blueberry gums. Yeah,
blueberry
sure.
gum? Okay.
Certainly blueberry teas, probably a lot of people. That's becoming much more popular now. But I think they're trying to get blueberries into any project, anything that would be suitable for fruits. But also, there are other things like blueberry chicken recipes, as a sauce or a condiment. Certainly, the cold soup, blueberry soup is very good. That's probably not very common, but so it's not just a dessert. It can be used. And a number of years ago, the food science department had an experiment looking at putting blueberries in warmed over hamburgers, because when in the schools they cook them ahead and then they warm them back up and you get this warmed over flavor. But the blueberries themselves have an antioxidant, so they looked at putting maybe 10% blueberries in the hamburgers, and when you warmed them up, the flavor was much better. It was the antioxidant, and they were healthier for you. So there's something blueberry hamburgers that you probably should see on the market. But,
right. Well, antioxidants kind of made blueberry sexy, but I really don't have any idea what we're talking about. What is an antioxidant? Why do I care?
Okay, well, oxygen, everybody thinks it's good for life, and it is. But actually, oxygen can be very toxic, and once it gets into a mode where they call a superradical, oxygen has 2 charges. If it gets a 3rd charge, then it becomes very highly reactive. And this reactive molecule is the oxidant. And this oxidant can infect your DNA, your cells. They're saying, well, this is the cause of aging. This is what, and this is the cause of cancer. And so what blueberries have, the antioxidants or the anthocyanins in the blueberry fruit are designed to capture that electron, capture that highly reactive and neutralize it. So the blueberries didn't do it for us; they did it for them. Because they're out in the environment and the sunlight's coming down, and they get these highly charged radicals, and so they want to keep them from hurting them. So when we eat those, we get that protective effect from the antioxidants. So this, there are insults, sun, smoking, even foods. Other foods cause this particular reaction. It's part of the biological process, part of life process, but by eating blueberries, we're able to protect ourselves from the negative effect of this oxidation process.
And they taste good.
They do. That's right. That's right.
It's like, finally, something that's good for me that I enjoy eating.
Better than broccoli, right?
Yeah. How do you create a new blueberry field? I know we touched on this a little bit earlier, but I do see them clearing fields next to other fields these days, and new blueberry crops are going to grow up there. How do they get it established?
Well, principally, they get it established where blueberries are already established. And that's the traditional way, and in the woods. As I said, the blueberries were here first, and the forest grew over them. They're surviving in the forest. They're more vegetative. You don't really have too many fruits. The leaves are small, but the plant's still there. So if you can take that overstory out and then allow all of that sunlight to hit the blueberries, then they're going to regenerate and they're going to spread underneath the ground. I do have a few farmers that are looking at trying to establish blueberries. There's 2 methods. One is taking a blueberry sod, which is that blueberry rhizome complex from a field, cut it out, and then bring it over to another field and transplant it in, mulch around it, and allow that to fill in. The other is by seed, and there's a breeder up in Canada, Agriculture Canada has this Nova Blue complex. So he took the 2 highest yielding blueberries he had, crossed them, and they took the seeds and put the seedlings out. Now the seedlings are, you'd start them in like tomato seedlings, and they're very small. But the problem with seedlings is they take years and years to get going. And even if you took tissue culture, which is another method of propagation, and propagated the plants, you get the small plants. And a very small plant takes a very long time to fill in. So we suggest that, trying to look at maybe for interplanting in between those large open areas that don't have blueberries. But as far as establishing a field, it would be very costly. I've one farmer experimenting with it, but he's pretty frustrated. They're not spreading them very fast. He's wondering what's going on, and what's going on is that blueberries don't spread fast.
I was doing a little bit of reading, especially on your website, and discovered that really pruning and burning the fields is harder than it looks. I used to think, hey, you go out there, you burn it, it's good.
Well, burning in itself is really problematic in that, you've got to have your fire lines established well. You've got to have enough people out there with pumps, because what you can have is once you burn the fields, you can get some of that organic matter, that duff layer smoldering, and you can walk away from the field, and the wind comes up and flares up, and then it blows into your neighbor's property. So what happens there is a fire service puts it out. They charge you for putting it out. They fine you for putting it out. And anybody's property that you burnt, you got to pay for, or camp, or so burning and using oil, which back in the 50s when it's 2 or 3 cents a gallon. That was the way to go. But now it's $4 or $5 a gallon, then it becomes very expensive. So if we can get the same effect, that is the pruning effect, to regenerate the new stems by mowing close to the ground within an inch, we do that. But the problem is the fields are really rocky and uneven. So, you've got to really modify. You've got to go in there and modify the field. And that sets it back a little bit. But once you get that field level enough that you can mow it, this is actually a lot more environmentally friendly, in the sense you don't have all that carbon going up and using all that oil. There are some advantages to burning. You burn up some of the weed seeds. You also get a nice ashing of the nutrients, release the nutrients quicker, and that actually black soil heats up quicker, warms up quicker, and the plants grow quicker. So, you're losing some natural advantages from burning, but, the cost and liability offsets it pretty much.
I would think maybe somebody who has a big operation would just look at his field to decide what needs to be mowed and what needs to be burned, depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
They do, and we have people that do that. But after a while, that burn part, they're either going to have to make a decision that's going to be too expensive, and they're going to let that part go back up into forest, or they're going to pull the rocks and level it and make blueberries. So that's a decision.
Again, I'm seeing a whole lot of rocks being removed just recently.
Yes.
So something changed out there.
Well, what's changed is, it's basically economics, and it's forcing people that they get, the price for blueberries really hasn't gone up a lot over the years. They're getting the same price they got 10 years ago, but they're producing 3 times as much. So you make it on volume, you don't make it on the price. So if you're still producing a very low amount, then you really have to have a value added, like an organic production or fresh market production, to make that particular operation work. If you're going to go to the processing plants and sell them there at the price, and it's been somewhere around 75, 80 cents a pound, you're not going to be able to make any money if you have a rocky field and you're spending all your money burning and hand harvesting, which is much more expensive.
We'll take a quick break and then get back with blueberry expert Dr. David Yarborough. I know that Maine soils are good for raising blueberries, but is there anything we can do to improve them? Stand by. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. You are listening to Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine, and I'm in the office of Dr. David Yarborough. He's the blueberry expert for the University of Maine Cooperative Extension Service. We're spreading a lot of science onto our blueberry fields. There's pollination, pest control, watering schemes, mowing rotations. But 2/3 of the blueberry plant is underground. Is there anything we can do to improve the soil?
One of the things we determined is because blueberries like a low an acid environment, we go out and we actually bring that pH down to 4. Now, bringing it down to 4, what that does is it limits the nutrients. And it limits the nutrients, then the weeds don't grow as well. But the blueberries have that mycorrhizal association I talked about. They're able to pull the nutrients from the soil, so they're able to do as low at a very low environment. So we put elemental sulfur little split peat sulfur out to lower that pH down. It takes about 1,000 pounds an acre to go for 1 pH unit. Fertilizer is another thing we look at. We don't really test the soil like most garden crops test the soil. So what's in the soil isn't as important to a blueberry plant because it has mycorrhizae and also has a rhizome, which is stored. They get a lot of stored nutrients. So with those two things, the available nutrients are not as important. So we test the leaves. If the leaves tell us the plant's deficient, that means they're not getting sufficient nutrients from the soil, and we adjust the fertilizer by then. And generally, we use a fertilizer called DAP, diammonium phosphate. So the ammonium form is very different too, because that's an acidic form. That's not like the nitrate form you use in your garden, and also doesn't leach into the soil. And the phosphorus is those are the only two elements that we've found that really benefit wild blueberries.
What now is the future of blueberries? At the 10,000-foot level here, where are we going with all this?
Well, I think the objective is to stay in business like anything else. And so what we're trying to do is identify research that would keep us going in the long run. If we have pests coming in, to identify ways to treat those pests and minimize any kind of pesticide inputs. We need to be efficient in our production and harvesting practices. We also need to increase our blueberries acreage. They've been probably, over the past years, there's a lot more blueberry acreage that's opened on the blueberry barrens, which kind of between Route 9 and Route 1, east of Ellsworth, that area is a major blueberry production area. So what we're seeing is a little bit less going from the coast. Some of those coastal lots that you can see the ocean. And
right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Put a $5 million house on. You just sell that, and you move inland a little bit, and we're finding even some of the areas that are frost prone in there, we can set up irrigation systems to protect the plants and to provide what they need. So, being more efficient and being competitive and staying. We've been growing wild blueberries before the Civil War, and we intend to keep on growing wild blueberries, but we won't be able to do that unless we can sell it at a price that's competitive on the international market.
Now, if you look at any reliable news source, and by that I mean not Fox News, Maine looks like it could be getting wetter and warmer. How's that going to affect blueberries?
Well, we've looked at that, and I looked back in the 50s, and back in the 50s, the number of degree days, the number of growing season days compared to now, we have a whole month extra growing season.
Oh, yeah.
So we got much milder fall. So actually, for us, at this point at least, that's an advantage because that means our plants can grow longer, they can develop more buds, they can become more productive. So that gives us a longer growing. So that's a very, very definite advantage. It does seem in Maine, although overall the trend in the south seems to be drought, we've had adequate moisture. The issue really is the moisture doesn't come when we want it. Yeah. And that's why we have irrigation. Because if you don't get that inch a week, 1 week, consistently, you're not going to get a good crop. So we still can get into drought situations in August. So I think for the major part, even talking about acid rain, blueberries love it acid. So, unfortunately,
so we're doing okay.
We're doing okay. Hey, we're making out. Some areas in global warming are going to lose, and some are gain. And at this point in time, we're in the gaining end. So that's been a good thing for us.
Yep. Agritourism. Farmers nationwide have tried to establish agritourism. Here's where I'm going with this. I was at the Yellow Rails and Rice Festival down in Louisiana last October because they have these birds, these rails, that go in the rice paddies during harvesting time. And the birders discovered, hey, if you just watch where the rice harvesters are going, all these rails come out and you get a good view. And so they made a festival out of it, and they work with the farmers down there. I was down there for that, and I said, wait a minute. We've got great blueberries with upland sandpipers, vesper sparrows in it. We're Acadia, they're Acadians. We have an Acadia birding festival that happens in June. What if we established a sister festival concept?
Well, it sounds like a great idea. Yeah. There's lots of birds on the barns that would expose people to that resource. It's really one of the great natural resources in the world. Those big glacial outwash plain. So that sounds like a great idea.
But the only thing I ever really see in terms of blueberry promotion tourism seems to be the big blueberry hut up there, and what is it,
yes.
Harrington, I guess it is?
Yes, it's in Columbia Falls, actually. Right on. Del Emerson was the former manager of the farm, and he built that dome. And yes, that is promotion. There, if you look really where wild blueberries grow, wild blueberries are an ingredient, and so most of the crop really goes out to buyers in Japan, Europe, Duncan Hines, Dunkin' Donuts. So Wyman's itself now has started a retail pack, but it's principally that type of market. So a lot of the marketing efforts are gone there. It's not like the blueberry festivals with strawberries where you go pick your own. There's very limited production of that. It's more of a larger commercial venture, but that doesn't mean you can't make room for birders out there.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, when I take people up there in the Columbia Blueberry Barrens, up there on Pea Ridge Road, for instance, and people look at the wide expanse of blueberry fields, especially when they're just ripening, their eyes bug right out.
It is. That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, there's nothing else like that.
That's true.
And we don't really show it to people.
Yeah, we need to get out and promote blueberries a lot more in that respect, yes.
Yep, because we got a winner here.
Yep.
Well, my thanks to Dr. David Yarborough, the Maine blueberry expert at Cooperative Extension. We've spent the last hour taming the wild blueberry. Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine is brought to you by Hammond Lumber, O'Neill's Power Equipment, Old Town Trading Post, Dysart's, EBS, and Napa Auto Parts. Remember our web address if you want to hear the show again or recommend it to others, 929theticket.com. This show and all previous shows are online right there. The next show happens next Saturday morning at 9 a.m. on Sports Radio 929 The Ticket.